Hey everybody, today I wanted to give a bit of a first impression review of Redcoats and Tomahawks, which is the North American 18th century supplement for Muskets and Tomahawks. On the back of the book in the description they re-emphasize that this is a game for the small war that is essentially to support the struggles of these periods. And so after reading through it, I just comment that, I do think that they make that differentiation. If this is a type of game where you're looking at complex maneuvers of large groups into different styles of units and things, I don't think that's what this game actually aims to do. So this is really very much a narrative, scenario-driven, smaller conflict-style game, and that becomes really apparent when you actually take a look through the Redcoats and Tomahawks supplement, in addition to the core rulebook, which I had done a review on. Looking at the table of contents, it shows that there's a section on what the supplement contains, and that will actually have descriptions of talents, which I'll show an example of in a moment. And it will talk about the random events table and boats and specific things to the period of Redcoats and Tomahawks as far as canoes and bateaux, as well as how to utilize rivers and how deployment will work in hidden movement, or at least how hidden movement applies within this supplement. As you can see here, they talk about the different conflicts that Redcoats and Tomahawks includes, which is French-Indian Wars, the War of Independence, and the War of 1812. And then as well, there's sections that focus on the different lists involved, or the different factions that you can employ, which are the British forces, the French forces, the American forces, and the Indian forces. Also included is a scenario generator, which I think is a hallmark of the original Muskets and Tomahawk first edition, as well as civilians and missions for those scenarios. And then the random events table. Officers can utilize talents that are specific to a specialized force. So if you primarily have, let's say, a group of regulars, then your officer can get for free a talent that's specific to that specialized force. And here's an example of that, where they get increased movement going into hand-to-hand combat. One of the nice things in this book is, depending on how much you enjoy history and that's brought you to this game, some folks like myself, as much as I like the French-Indian War period, had not read a tremendous amount of the history. It was more from growing up in school and things. And so there's a section that actually shows where many of the battles were fought and where the areas were primarily British occupied versus French controlled versus disputed areas. And so they give a couple of pages on each period to make people more familiar with it. Here's an example of a unit entry, and this is for the British regular officer. Now, borrowing a little bit, I think, from the organization style of Saga, you'll notice that there's some color coding and labeling that happens here at the top. Previous to this entry, they do describe how each of these symbols on the right that are color-coded C, I, and 12 are focused on the French-Indian War for the C, the American War of Independence for the I, and then the 12 for the War of 1812. And so as long as you have one of those symbols next to the unit entry, you're able to use that unit entry for that period. As well, you'll notice that there's a dot to the left that is a red dot. Now that also relates to the sort of nationality, and this is kind of more important for the British list on first glance from what I can tell. But it can actually affect where certain officer types are able to lead certain units of troops and provide their officer command abilities and bonuses. Basically, they have it covered in the command and nationality section. And so officers can't provide their bonuses to a unit that would have a different color than what they have. In this case, the unit dot is red, and so any unit that has that red dot, the British officer can provide their bonuses to. But as an example, if it was, let's say, American War of Independence, if it's a group of factions that are German and they have a different colored dot, then that British officer might not be able to, rally their unit with providing their morale bonus. For those of you that played the first edition, many of the characteristics here will look similar, and we've talked a little bit about this, I think, in the first review, but they have type, discipline, shooting, aggression, and defense. And then below they have sections for equipment and relevant traits. And then there are options with the point values. And at the very top they have the overall point value for the unit. One of the great things about Muskets and Tomahawks is the scenario generator that you can use. And it actually has very similar to the original scenario generator. It provides all of the options for weather and how to set up the table, how you choose your attacker and your defender, how reinforcements may apply for particular missions, and how to select your missions. One of the things that's interesting is they describe it as an asymmetric scenario generator, because that is true, and unlike many games, most of your scenarios you're not just trying to do the same thing, it appears, and which is similar to the original edition, which is a nice thing, is you have different objectives. One of the things that I thought was really interesting in this edition is that scenarios or missions are differentiated as being set in inhabited areas versus in the savage wilds. From playing the first edition, it was almost always done in such a way that there was an inhabited area on the table. This was always great, I thought, because it allowed you to use your terrain, your buildings and things, and I never minded it. But a difference now in the second edition is they have scenarios that are meant to be more focused on in the wilds, like out in the woods, and not necessarily with a built-up town area or something like that. And so really it gives you a choice. Missions are differentiated as to being whether they be the attacker or defender and color-coded red and green. There are also 11 different missions split between the two in this supplement, and that, in addition to another 3 within the core game, brings it up to 14 missions, which is quite a bit more than the first edition of Muskets and Tomahawks. As you can see here, a mission has a general description, information on deployment, special rules, and then victory conditions. And again, each player will have a different mission depending on whether the attacker or defender, and whether they're in a built-up area or in the wilds will sort of guide them towards a particular mission. A random events table is included, and it has a very familiar system where you roll 2 dice, and first die and second die then determine which kind of random event happens. And this does span a couple of pages. The supplement is just a little over 40 pages and really does have a lot of information, and the bulk of the supplement, as expected, are the unit entries for the 4 different forces that are in the book that are available to you. As an example here, this is still within the British, you'll see there's just a variety of units here just on this one page. There's 4 units, all with the similar setup that I showed in the beginning. And you can see how there's a variability among each unit as to which conflicts they're available. In this case, on this one, the British Dragoons are not available within the French Indian War, and so you don't see the blue C next to British Dragoons. One of the nice things for if depending on how much military history you actually know, they do give little blurbs under each title of a unit entry, just describing a little bit about the unit to give you an understanding of what it is. There may be some types of units that have a bit more of an esoteric name if you're not familiar with the period, and so that can really help you understand a little bit about who these forces were. It gives a bit of character and flavor to the feeling of the supplement. As an example, under the British Light Infantry category here, it says, combat in New France and the American colonies shone a light on the need to adapt the British Army to their terrain. That's why some soldiers were training the arts of light infantrymen, starting slowly. This change was definitely and efficiently made at the end of the 18th century. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I found those, just when glancing through this, to be kind of helpful and interesting. Overall, my impression of the Redcoats and Tomahawks supplement is that it really does give the flavor of the North American conflicts throughout the book, and I think it'll be a great supplement for the Muskets and Tomahawks game, which really in many respects it's sort of the original foundation of the game and how it was initially presented, and it will be interesting to see future supplements that'll come out. My understanding is that there should be supplements for the Napoleonic era and others as well coming in the future.